This is the lie that goes out to all men. Don't be emotional or relational. Because a real man doesn't have emotion and doesn't have relationship. Now, how many of you guys, you grew up with a dad, not to be negative or pejorative, but like your dad was just not emotional. He was not emotionally present, or he had one emotion, angry. That's it. Or he was non-relational. Some men are just not relational. Some of you guys are like, I don't really know my dad. He didn't really ever say anything. What he was thinking, doing, I don't really know. It's just, my dad wasn't emotional or relational. And there's a whole generation of men, especially older generations of men, they were told just don't be emotional and don't be relational because men are emotional and men aren't relational. The truth is, men and women have the same emotions, we just express them in masculine and feminine ways. True? Like, my wife gets happy and she giggles. I don't. You know, I get happy, but I don't giggle, right? As well, I do get emotional. I'll be honest with this. I think I cry more than my wife, but I tend not to cry out of sadness. I tend to cry out of joy. So like there are times when my daughter, how many of you, your daughters make you cry? My daughters all the time. It's like a superpower. So my daughter's like, Dad, I love you. Could I talk to you? Could you pray? Yes, I would like to do that. So most of my tears are shed with my daughters in joy. So when I get really joyful, I don't giggle, especially if it's my daughters. I tend to get very emotional. So let's look at Jesus. Jesus is God become a man. He's perfect as a man. Was Jesus emotional? Yeah, he was very emotional. In all four Gospels, it mentions Jesus' emotions about 60 times. And Jesus was nothing like Spock in Star Trek. He was emotionally present. Let me just look at one of the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I'll look at Mark, because that's obviously the most handsome name for a book of the Bible. So we'll look at that one. And in just different translations, just read with me the emotions. 141, pity, compassion, or he was indignant. 3:5, anger, grieved, anger and sorrow, anger and deeply distressed, or angrily, deeply saddened. 6:6, marveled, amazed, wondered. 6:34, as well as chapter 8, verse 2, chapter 9, verse 22, compassion. Just so you know, that is the number one most frequently mentioned emotion of Jesus Christ in the Bible. He had compassion. You know what that means? You're not a godly man like your father and Jesus your big brother if you don't have compassion for people. If you have compassion, that's actually masculine maturity. 7:34, he sighed deeply, deep sigh. How about this one on the next slide? 8:12, sighed deeply in his spirit. 10:21, he loved. He felt a love with love and genuine love. A lot of times men are told, oh, don't say I love you. Well, if you have a wife and kids, you sure better. And when grandkids come, you should double down, say it all the time. 14:33 and 34, greatly distressed and troubled. My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. And then on the cross, Jesus says, my God, why have you forsaken me? True or false? Jesus was emotional. Shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. Was Jesus immature? No. Was he effeminate? No. Was he mature and masculine? Yes. And was he emotional? Yes. So some of you guys, especially those of you who maybe you grew up with a Stoic father, or maybe you're the older generations that were taught not to be emotional, just remember your goal is not to be like your earthly father, but like your heavenly Father. And ultimately, you should be the guys who kiss your kids, on the head, tell them you love them. You should hold your daughter's hand. You should be doing daddy dates. You should be telling your kids that you love them. You should be telling your wife that you love her. When your kids or your wife are going through something, it's okay to get emotional and to grieve with them, to process them, to be emotionally present and to have compassion. Hey, howdy, Pastor Mark here. Thanks for viewing the clip. And if you'd like the entire sermon, we've got it ready to go.